Hello everybody and welcome back to Slow Your Roll. I'm Cody.
And I'm Alex.
And today we are doing a bit of a deep dive on the defenses of DC20 now that they've updated to the newest update, and they are way improved in our opinion. We're also going to be doing a little bit of how you can use them with monsters, so we'll touch on monster creation a little bit. If you want a more in-depth video of that, let us know in the comments and we'll work on that as well. Today we're just touching on it. But from there, I think I'll just send it to you, Alex. Let's get us started here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing we're going to be talking about is defenses. Both precision defense and area defense, because they've changed from the typical physical defense and mystical defense. What exactly precision defense is exactly what you're thinking of, trying to stab someone with a sword or hitting them with the bow. And this is generally calculated with your agility and intelligence. So how quick you might be able to respond on the battlefield, whether it be with your body or your mind. And when talking about area defense, you're going to calculate that with might and charisma. Might is self-explanatory, how strong you are, shirking off the damage. But in DC20, charisma is not just about talking to people. It's directly tied to grit, your ability to literally grin and bear it, just to take off the damage and play through the pain. And in general, that's the new defenses in DC20. You might be thinking how those apply to saves, and I know somebody who's got the answer to that.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll try to get a hold of them. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, you might be thinking, why not just use the saves that you might be used to in D&D, if you're a D&D player, like many are. And the truth is, you still do use saves, but not for damage things. So you are definitely still going to see your saving throws trying to save from effects that are conditions, like the bleeding status effect or being knocked prone, something like that. You'll still see some saves there. Even traps, because that might just feel more fun to have the players roll for instead of the trap rolling, because that doesn't make much sense. But some of the benefits of using AD instead of having to roll saving throws is that a single attack roll against multiple targets defense is only one roll and super fast. So if someone casts Fireball that's an enemy casts on your players, they just roll for the attack and compare it to all of their area defenses instead of making them all roll the saving throws. Just a little bit more faster and concise, because the alternative is all of the group that got hit would roll saving throws and have to relay that to you instead, which takes a minute sometimes. But again, like I said, saves are still in the game where I feel they should be, for the most part, to save from effects instead of just damage.
So if we were going to try to apply this to monsters, how exactly would this work? Try to think of it like this. An ogre would have a relatively low precision defense because it's relatively easy to hit them. There's a whole bunch of real estate that you've got to hit. But alternatively, they probably have a relatively high area defense because for the most part, they're thick-skinned, they're brutish. They can shrug off a decent amount of damage coming from something like a fireball. And when making monsters, I generally like to focus on one defense that they're better at than the other. So that way it gives the parties something to focus on when they get into combat. Or alternatively, you could have something like a pixie. They would have a relatively high precision defense because they're quick and flighty. But you could probably assume that they would have a relatively low area defense because if something blows up next to them, they're getting engulfed twice.
100%. My first thought with that is playing Helldivers, the little flying dudes. Can't remember what they're called. Shriekers, that's what they're called. It's kind of hard to hit them with like a pistol, but pretty easy to hit them with the breaker, a shotgun just spraying in the air. That's the idea.
Are you telling me I was doing it right while I was shooting the bazooka at the seagulls on Master Chief Collection?
Yeah. You are definitely doing it right, buddy, I think.
And when taking into consideration what defense your monster might be good at, it's best to consider your party as well. Maybe even tailor the experience of this monster to something they're good at, or maybe something they're not so good at.
Okay, so now we've kind of explained the whole thing, but there's a lot of videos and even the dungeon coach himself that have kind of gone through this concept. So now we're going to do exactly what this comment says and give you some real streamlined examples to understand what exactly this might look like in action. The first one is going to be something like a Cyclops. Really, it could be any giant. If you want to flavor it up a little bit, it could be an actual giant, an Etten, an Oni. Now you've got kind of like a Asian-inspired adventure potentially. But we'll stick with a Cyclops for the sake of the example. And you'll notice the Cyclops is going to have low PD and high AD, similar to the Ogre. So basically this means the PD is low because it is slow or can't dodge well, something like that, and it's a large target. This means that all of your precision targeted attacks like arrows, sword slices to the Achilles or knees, something like that, or of course, a perfectly timed shot to the eyeball, those ones are going to be crippling. But this thing might shrug off something like a fireball or some wave of force or whatever else, something like that, easier than some other creatures would. Now to dial that in a little bit further, you can expect that the damage that this creature is going to be dishing out to your players is probably going to look largely like area defense attacks. These will be things that target the area defense. Something like a thrown boulder, club hits, even swiping its hand along the ground. Anything like that's going to cover an area and possibly hit more than one player at a time anyway. But then you could even get fancy with it and do like, it has specific ground smash attacks, or it gets frustrated and stomps on the ground. And then a bunch of spaces around where it's standing could even take area defense damage. Or the final spice to the creature, you could even give it effects or conditions to save from. So maybe when it is doing this whole stomping around ground smash thing, the players do have to do saving throws to remain standing on their feet and not fall prone.
And for another example to tackle, I'm going to be talking about the swarm. Let's go with bees for now. You could totally imagine that a swarm would have a very high precision defense, because an arrow might just go straight through a swarm of bees, or a sword even. But inversely, if you had that gust of wind to blow them all away with a big area, that's probably going to be your key. This would mean large, multi-targeted attacks would be a little bit more effective for things that have a low area defense. And when it comes to an attack from a bee swarm, you're gonna bet that that's a sting. And you might think that that should be a precision defense. And you know what? You're right. Or it could be area defense because it's 1,000 little stings all at the same time. It's really just whatever flavor of monster you want to create at the time. And when we're talking about some monsters, they don't have to be the bear, the lion, the owl bear, something that everybody's seen 1,000 times. Doesn't have to be a swarm of bees. Maybe it's like a swarm of fireflies from Atlantis. You can put a little bit of flavor on that, but these fireflies actually hit you with fire. There's a bunch of different just flavor things that you can add to a very basic creature to make it totally different on your table.
And I like that you said that it could possibly target precision defense or area defense, depending on whatever kind of creature you want to make with that. And I think that's really cool. And honestly, all it might take is just a little bit of like narrative description. You could intentionally say that, man, it's a lot of stings. So as they're attacking you, some are even crawling up in your armor, which would definitely be like an area defense situation then, right? So I think that's cool. It's really just the narrative of how you describe it happening that could determine either way. But anyway, there are 2 defenses, right? But surprisingly, that's not all you can use. So let's say, for example, the in-between, the hybrid of these situations, you've got something like a gelatinous cube, where maybe the PD and AD are kind of low at just like 10. You know, you can hit this thing without much issue, but you've always got the other secret defense that is resistances. Maybe this gelatinous cube might be easy to hit, but is incredibly resistant to almost all damage, except for the puzzle that your players have to figure out that it's especially vulnerable to ice damage as it kind of contorts its form and stiffens it up and locks it into place.
Absolutely. And you can iterate this by making it PDR, EDR, or MDR. No, ADR.
Yeah, that's right. No, it is MDR. You were actually right.
No, it is MDR. Okay.
Those are the only things that are actually still tied to damage, technically. That's like physical damage resistance, elemental damage resistance, and mystical damage resistance.
Yep. So you could just give it a PDR and MDR, but leave off EDR, and you could totally have it be the ice is the only thing that works. But, you know.
Exactly. That's actually amazing, because then like other things like you said, corrosive damage or like even fire damage could like mess with its form a little bit.
Yes.
I love that. That's exactly how I would do it, actually.
But now that you've got the tips on how you can handle defenses and resistances with your monsters, let's wrap it all together with a couple of really cool examples. And if I was going to leave 1 point on for monster creation, it's tailoring the monster to your party. Let's just say you have somebody with tremor sense. Well, I would say it's the perfect time to introduce a sandworm. This sandworm has been stalking the party the entire session, and the only person who knows is your player with tremor sense. By the time the battle starts, he's got an advantage.
That is awesome, and it's a really good way to reward the character build or archetype in one way too. Or you could go the exact opposite route and directly challenge a character build to some degree, forcing them or other players to chime in to overcome this thing. So maybe this sandworm that the character with tremor sense had a leg up on has a special move where it does a rapid circling on the ground that leaves a lingering earthquake. And now not even creatures with tremor sense can track what this thing's doing, at least for a little while.
And in the same vein of challenging your party that is good at something, everybody knows that the cleric is going to be able to take out undead easy. That radiant damage does a number on most undead. But what if you threw something that's the exact opposite at them? What if your radiant cleric now has to fight another radiant source? Let's just say an angel or angel-born was tied up and kept in prison. Their head was messed with a little bit, and now you need to get them out of prison, but you gotta fight them first. I can only imagine how devastating that might feel for a cleric to get hit with their own divine blessings.
That is very true, and even if there isn't like a bonus to damage like they might have against undead, with this double down radiant situation, maybe you could just go the route of building an enemy or situation where the enemy is actually tactical, and so they are super intentional about targeting the healer of the party, which again is this cleric. And now they have to find a way to either dodge this damage one way or another, or the rest of the players have to step in to defend them, instead of the cleric dishing out all the damage to undead creatures.
Yeah, definitely. They've been getting away with it for too long. All they're doing is beating up these mindless things. Once they finally get a lich, you know their target enemy number one.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't even have to be just because they know he's healing them, or they can banish the undead. What if he just thinks you look funny?
Yeah, exactly. Your example of the lich actually makes sense. You know, maybe they're also undead, and they just inherently hate the cleric's goodness. So it's not even that they're smart, maybe. Maybe it's just that I just hate them so bad, they're the target. Okay, but of course we are talking about like kind of personal targeting with characters. And make sure you're doing that in a good sense. Like only do it if it's fun. If the party's like, wow, an interesting challenge. That's cool, that's fun. You know, don't over-target a character consistently, you jerk.
And for our final example, it's the simplest of them all. If you have somebody that can breathe underwater, give them water. If you have somebody that can climb, let them climb. If you have somebody that can fly, let them fly. Or if you want to challenge them, make it hard to do those things.
Yeah, I mean, it really is that simple. So there's some examples of why a challenge should work or not work for a player, and it's up to you, given what we told you about the defenses, how to build cool monsters using them, to incorporate those challenges directly using the monsters or the encounters.
So that was our deep dive into the defense changes of precision defense and area defense, and maybe a couple of examples of how you can take them to your table with a few monsters too. If you guys really do want to see how we create monsters, please leave that down in the comments below, because this whole video was actually one of the suggestions from you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that.
But until next time, everybody, we'll see you all later.
See ya.